Hi, I'm Femi OK and you're in the stream. Today, the sex abuse scandal that stunned the UK. Did the pursuit of political correctness get in the way of justice? So this child exploitation scandal has been going on for a really long time in the UK, but a recent report has come out, which means why we're doing this conversation today. Malika Bilal, looking out for online comment as always. What are you seeing right now?
Well, our community is talking about that report. It was released in August and it detailed things that our community frankly is shocked about.
Right.
And so they're commenting with things like this. Sevilla on Twitter says, I've read the report twice. And what really frustrates and horrifies me is the scale of abuse, how it was known and yet ignored. So we'll get into those details during today's show. We want your help with this. Tweet us your questions and your comments with hashtag AJStream.
So I know many of you are not just watching us online or on TV, you're also multitasking as well. So there are many ways that you can actually connect while you're on your computer. Have a look at my laptop right now. You can connect with us via Facebook and Twitter, Google+, even Instagram. Connect with us on the stream and you too could end up in the stream.
Hi, I'm Amanda Pick. I am the Executive Director of the Missing Children Society of Canada and the creator of Milk Carton 2.0, and I'm in the stream.
It's a child sex abuse scandal spanning more than a decade that has stunned England and shocked the world.
We was just hanging around in the bus station and they started to touch me up, my main perpetrator and another member of the group, and I felt uncomfortable because obviously I'd never had a boyfriend or anything like that. I was still a child. Next thing I knew, it was actually on top of me raping me and I was being pinned down by other men.
Of the more than 1,000 victims from the town of Rotherham, most were young white girls. The accused perpetrators, mostly men from Britain's Pakistani community. An independent report claims that authorities failed to investigate allegations because they didn't want to incite Islamophobia.
And I had no one to run to or turn to, you know. My parents became aware of what was happening and they was banging on every door possible. No one would help them. It was seen as I was making a choice and actually I'd had all my choices removed from me.
The scandal has sparked racial tension throughout the community as political and religious leaders call for a united front in combating the abuse and its collateral damage. And here to discuss this issue, we have in London Mohammed Shafiq. He's Chief Executive of Ramadan Foundation. In Bradford, Alias Kamani is Director of Street UK. And in Rotherham, Zuleika Ahmed is founder of Abna Haq. And Mubin Hussain is founder of British Muslim Youth. It's good to have you all here in the stream. Welcome. Zuleika, hello. It's great to have you all here in the mix.
Good evening.
So I'm trying to get my head around this idea that political correctness would stop an investigation into child sex abuse. Zuleika, sitting there in Rotherham, can you give us an idea of how this is even possible, being PC but not investigating major child sex abuse?
I personally would challenge some of that assumptions and some of those views that have been put out.
Yeah.
Because if you look at what's actually happened, you had very young girls who were reporting to the police, who social services were aware of that they were being sexually abused. But the language that was being used both by the police and social services were that these girls were asking for sex, they were wanting sex,
right,
and that they were complicit. So I think part of this thing that there was a complacent, or the council were afraid of what the ethnic minority community may say.
Yeah.
Is part of the excuses in a way that we've been given.
Do you think they're
that's
just trying to? Yeah.
That's how I would feel.
Do you think it's just a cover-up then, Zuleika?
Yeah, because I mean, living as a black ethnic minority woman, Muslim woman who lives in Rotherham, I can't think of any other situation where the local authority have been afraid of coming and talking to us.
So here I'm looking at this. Alexis J, independent inquiry author. This is this independent inquiry that has just come out in August. Several staff described their nervousness about identifying the ethnic origins of perpetrators for fear of being thought racist. Others remembered clear direction from their managers not to do so. So, Mubin, you're also sitting there in Rotherham. Do you think there's anything to this? Zuleika says it was just an excuse. Do you think that the inquiry really found that people were saying, okay, we can't touch this Pakistani community, we don't want to go there?
Well, firstly, we need to look on what basis they were suggesting the Pakistani community they couldn't touch, you know. If you're going to lay a blame on racism, then you have to see, did we consult the Pakistani community? Who did we tell and where did this idea come from? Today's actually been the Home Affairs Select Committee within Parliament, where members of the authority figures have actually been in there. Med Hughes, who was actually the Chief Constable from 2006 to 2011, the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police, he himself came out and said, I had no idea that these sorts of actions were being taken place. So when these high authority figures are saying we didn't know what was happening, and then to lay the blame on racism and say, you know, we weren't, you know, who gave them this mandate? Did they speak to the Asian community, the Pakistani community, and suggest that they said they didn't want to, or they would have race riots? Are they not arresting Pakistani community on other types of crimes? I think this is a big questions that need to be had, and to lay a claim that racism was the option, then we need to look at a wider picture on policing within South Yorkshire.
Well, Mohammed, I want to bring you in here and picking up on something that was said earlier. Zuleika mentioned actually that social services were aware of the reports of abuse, and that's what our community is also picking up on. Elizabeth on Facebook writes that authorities are disinclined to believe women and children who report sexual abuse and rape, regardless of the perpetrator. It's easier and cheaper, she writes, to dismiss these claims, especially when they come from marginalized groups. And so, Mohammed, I know that you have been speaking out on this for several years, these reports of abuse. What does it look like on the ground? Who are these marginalized groups that Elizabeth mentions?
Well, I think Elizabeth's absolutely right. These marginalised people are generally people in the care system, people who come from broken homes, who come from challenging environments. And that's where the groomers have utilised, if you like, a skill set to try to brainwash the girls against their family, groom them, use them and abuse them, and then sell them on to their friends, their family and their colleagues. And that's the abhorrent sort of behaviour that has gone on, not just in Rotherham, it's been going on in various towns.
So Mohammed, let me just stop you for a moment, because some people are joining this story afresh. You're sitting there in the UK, this has been rumbling around as a story for a very long time.
It has for many years.
Yeah, internationally though, a lot of people just tuning in for the first time. The whole grooming gang phenomenon, very briefly, just tell us what that is.
Well, this is on-street gang grooming. This is where young guys drive around in flashy cars and try to pick up young girls. Now, in the north of the country, on the on-street gang grooming crime, the phenomenon, there is an overrepresentation of Pakistani men, as there is in Rotherham, as there was in Rochdale, and as there was in Oxford, in a number of towns, where most of the people carrying out those crimes are of Pakistani origin, and the victims are white. And I think there's one important thing for your viewers across the world to understand, is that these criminals have a lesser view about these white girls. They think that white girls are worthless. They think they can be used and abused in this abhorrent sort of way, and that's the thing that we've got to confront. And let me be very clear, I think if you look at what I was saying in 2006 when I first began campaigning against this, I was a lone voice. Now you have a program tonight, you have 3 other people participating in this program that are leading the fight against grooming. And so I'm proud of the fact that as a community, not only are we just talking about it, we're actually confronting this issue head on.
Can I just come in just to make a point that in terms of men who abuse, and in terms of these Pakistani men that abused white girls, we've also got evidence to show that they've also abused internally. So it's not just white girls that they're abusing. A man who's going to abuse will abuse whichever woman he can get hold of.
Well, Zuleika, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I just got this tweet from Sabia, and she says the report also states that not many girls of ethnic backgrounds came forward. And the greatest concern for her, she writes, is how do we encourage that to happen?
Yeah, it's part of the work that we try and do as an organisation. But that there is a big issue that in terms of the UK, we don't have a lot of resources, a lot of services for non-white communities. So when, for example, I talk to social services and I talk to the police and say, for example, child abuse, domestic violence, sexual grooming is happening within our communities, they don't really understand, and they're not really looking or putting in the appropriate resources.
We spoke to Dr. Shaz Mahboob. He's a member of the British Muslims for Secular Democracy, and we were talking to him just in the last 24 hours about the spotlight that this child sexual exploitation scandal has put on the Pakistani community in Rotherham and also basically in the UK. This is what he told us.
Issues that we're seeing today in the form of the abuse of mainly white vulnerable girls hails from the very mindset where especially white girls are seen as fair game, and they aren't viewed with as much respect as Asian girls. Hence, this issue has emerged and it's erupted in such a form that the whole Pakistani British community has been maligned because of the actions of these few individuals.
So Alias here, you've just got this spotlight right now on the Pakistani community. How comfortable is that in terms of a community having to look at itself and say, okay, were we complicit in this? What has it done to the community right now?
Look, I want to come back on a few of the other points.
Yeah.
I actually train social workers and police officers around child sexual exploitation, and I've trained officers from that particular area. And one of the things I always make it clear is that when it comes to the gang rape of children, there can't be any political correctness. You know, we're talking about children whose lives are being irrevocably destroyed, children who are trafficked and abused in the most reprehensible, most wicked, most obscene way. And I think the whole issue of racism is a deflection. Just to give the kind of Just to give the viewers an idea, Rotherham is a very small town in the north of England. For 1,400 children over a 10-year period to have fallen through the net just shows that there is actually a fundamental and endemic failure that was taking place, not just on the part of the agencies, but on the part of everyone. That's schools, that's teachers, that's parents, that's community members, that's elected members, the list goes on. And I think sometimes it's very convenient to deflect the issue and focus on race
So Alias,
and to
this is like a major fail. Like, there are over 1,400 young girls that we know about.
Absolutely.
That we actually know about. What about all the rest? Like, why would that even happen?
Absolutely.
What is it about Rotherham that would make people go, well, okay, we don't even want to touch this?
Can I come in?
But actually, it's not just Rochdale.
No.
Let me just say, it's not. It's not just Rotherham. It's Rochdale. It's Bradford. It's Oldham. It's Telford. It's
Shafiq,
Oxford.
you know, Shafiq,
let me just say this. Let me just say this, Ilyas. Let me just say this.
Yeah.
It's happening across this country. And one of the problems we had in 2006 was that there was a denial that it was going on. Now we don't have that problem. Now we have an acceptance from people, as you've seen on your program tonight, but wider within the Pakistani community, that we've got to confront this issue. The problem I've got is when the gentleman from the secular Muslim group or something, and other and other far-right groups who are using this to demonize Muslims and Islam, using this to be an excuse to bash Muslims and Pakistanis. So we don't need to be defensive. We need to confront this issue. We need to be outspoken, because as a father of 3 daughters myself, I don't see any difference between my daughters and the daughters who have been groomed in this way.
Right.
The system's failed. And Rotherham, I think Rotherham is the worst case that we've come across, because the very institutions that are there to protect children
Shafiq,
have failed them.
come in?
And we still have those
Shafiq,
people in post.
Shafiq,
Yes.
look, there's important context we have there. Why Rotherham and why Rochdale? Actually, if you ask any practitioner who worked in the care system in the 70s and the 80s and in the 90s, they will say that sexual abuse of older children was endemic. And it wasn't just Pakistani perpetrators. The perpetrators, as we know, came from all backgrounds. So there was a culture of turning a complete blind eye when it came to older children who were being trafficked and who were being sexually abused. And there aren't thousands, there are tens of thousands of children in the UK who have been sexually abused. We've had very high profile cases with Jimmy Savile, with Rolf Harris. In Rochdale, as you know, you had Cyril Smith.
These are all British celebrities. Cyril Smith was a Liberal MP.
These are white indigenous males. Now, if we go to the Rochdale case, Cyril Smith was a MP. He was he was sexually abusing boys in care homes with impunity.
All right, so Alias, what's the point you're going to make? Because I don't want to get us too off track of this conversation.
Look, the point I'm making is that we're talking about a global phenomenon. UNICEF came out with a report this week which said 1 in 3 women.
So it's not about the Pakistani community. It's about our society right now today. All right, hold that thought for a moment.
If I could just add one point.
Yeah, you can. Let me just ask you to hold that thought for a moment, because community want to join in as well. So we have 5 people in this conversation, and the 5th sensitive person is getting antsy. Malika.
Right, they are. They're keeping up, though. And Mubin, I want to bring you in here with this, because we heard earlier Mohammed say that years ago there was a denial, and that's changing, but we still see tweets like this. Kevin writes in, perhaps it's time for the Muslim community to step forward and help with the solution rather than deny the problem. Another tweet, this is from Sudaf, and she says religious leaders need to discuss sexual abuse instead of regarding it as taboo. So Mubin, what do you say to tweets like that?
Okay, firstly, within the Rotherham case, Muslim wasn't even mentioned. We was talking about Pakistani men. And to bring in religion is something what Ilyas Kamani was talking about earlier. It's when we want to bring in this idea of Islamophobia, this whole idea of, hysteria to be built upon it. I think we need to look at this on two scales and bring in Muhammad Shafiq's point. Firstly, nobody is denying that within the Rotherham report, large number of these men were Pakistani men. There isn't a denial on this. But what you have to understand is that looking out, Rotherham is a specific case. Looking at child exploitation on a larger scale, you find with all the practitioners and the reporters say it is an issue within society of men. These individuals should not be seen on race lines or religious lines, but in criminal lines. Now, I believe, look, there are similarities within these individuals. If I find these criminals within the Pakistani community that are the criminals, they live double lifestyles. One lifestyle they live is a respectable lifestyle where they go out in the community and do a lot of good work. And at the same time, they live this lifestyle which is dark, damning, and of criminal nature. The same can be said about Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile was a celebrity, lived a respectable lifestyle, did a lot of charity, but at the same time,
can I just come in? Mubin, can I just come in with something? Do you know the Muslim community did something unprecedented last year? 500 mosques around the country. I actually wrote the sermon. Yeah, go on.
And Ilyas, can I say something? Because I've never met Ilyas Kamani in my life. I remember at my mosque when imams actually came out and spoke out. In 2012 and 2013, I said imams, but not just imams, all religious leaders, all leaders from every community, because this is the problem within society. And Ilyas Kamani, I've never met him, but I know his work because in my local mosque, this imam speech was given. To say the Muslim community is not doing anything is also a lie, and to suggest,
So what's the Muslim community doing? Because this is a big, big scandal that actually does need some reaction from all the community, right?
Can I give an example?
Because the imams did actually respond to this on a national scale, where I didn't see any other community come out on a national scale. But the problem is here, if we look at it on a race and religious lines, we forget the victims. Why are we not talking about the 1,400 victims that haven't been given justice? Why are we not talking about the criminals that are still on the streets of Rotherham? Why are we not talking about how we can get them prosecuted? And the girls that are from the Asian community that haven't actually came out and spoke out, how we can get them to speak out? I think we've got major issues here, but when we drag into race and religious lines, we do make headline news, international news, but we don't provide justice.
I really, Mubin, I have to say to you, and I say to this to members of our community, this defensive approach, and I know our community is under attack and there's a rise of Islamophobia, we all accept that and we all have to do whatever we can to counter that, but I don't think it helps if we start becoming defensive, if we start comparing child sexual abuse. We accept, as a wider society accept, let me just make this point, we accept that 80% of child sexual abuse is carried out by white men, and it's carried out by white men who know the victim. But on the phenomenon of on-street gang grooming, as I keep going back to, there's an overrepresentation of Pakistani men. And as Mubin said, when we engage in a debate about religion, which has got nothing to do with Islam, it's got nothing to do with our religious teachings, when we engage in a debate that starts becoming a political football, we then forget the victims, we then forget the responsibility. So as a community, we've got a responsibility to root out this problem. And I'm proud of the fact, I sit here tonight, 6-7 years ago, I was a lone voice. I was the only person. I got death threats. I got accused of doing the work of the far right. 6 years on, you've got 3 magnificent other people in this debate who are doing some fantastic work. You've got many members and imams in the community doing work. So we're actually seeing a real sea change of activity. So yes, let's get justice for the victims. Let's get the people behind the bars. But more importantly, let's make sure that the people who are responsible for this, the people who the institutions that were there to protect children, that action is taken against them. And finally, I think the most important thing is we should celebrate the fact that as an outward community now, we're actually confronting this. And I think that's a matter of pride for me and all those of us who've been involved in this campaign.
And Mohammed, and that's also true for those who are watching and tweeting us. Yaqub writes, sexual abuse is an international problem. We'll make it trivial if we associate it with religion or race. But Zuleika, I want to bring you in here because we're talking about the problems, but what about what happens next and where we go from here? Bina writes, it's vital to remember that Rotherham is more about misogyny, individual and institutional. And Zuleika, I know that that's something that you work on every day.
Yeah, I just wanted to give the example that in terms of our organisation, we've been running for 20 years now. But in terms of when I set up APNAHAG, I set that up as a lone individual from the voluntary sector. The police, social services, housing, were all saying that domestic violence doesn't happen in Asian communities because women were not coming forward. And I have an issue with that because whether you're looking at sexual grooming, whether you're looking at domestic violence, whether it's rape, not many of our girls, women come forward, and agencies are complacent with that. And my issue with that is I, as a woman, like many people in the UK, are taxpayers. So we have a right to services. And for as long as services don't acknowledge the issues that are going on internally, for example, the abuse of Asian young girls, the abuse of Muslim young girls, then women are trapped and not able to get out.
I want to show you something.
Can I just come in on that as well,
Yeah,
Femi?
go ahead.
Because Street UK obviously is a frontline project. We work with young people in hotspot areas who are gang affected, who are at the front line of sexual abuse. And one of our main roles is actually working with young men who are potential perpetrators of child sexual exploitation. And we work across the country. We work with young men of all backgrounds, black, white, Asian, all faiths. Now, we have been identified as a model of best practice, because we're there out in the middle of the night, out on the streets, identifying vulnerable children and pulling them off the streets. The biggest problem that we have is that the funding is just currently not there to do this kind of work. In the UK at the moment, on massive public cuts, what that means is that lots of frontline services have been lost. And this is at a time when vulnerability is probably at one of its highest. Youth services across the country have been cut. So the important people who engage young people and get the disclosure. See, it takes one of my workers, 5 or 10 minutes to get a disclosure from a young person, and a disclosure that they would never give to a police officer or a social worker.
What do you mean by disclosure?
That they will disclose, I am being trafficked, I am being abused, I am being pimped. Okay, tonight there is a party house where 30 men will come and gang rape children. We get that report on a regular basis. And then what it is our frustration is that, and this is in many parts around the country where we want to do the work. We really, and to build on Muhammad Shafiq and Mubin's point as well, there is a real desire to get out there on the streets and be part of the solution. But we're just not getting the help from the agencies. And we're not getting the funding and the resources being allocated to us.
And Ilyas, I think that's the most important point. The point is that if the government and in the institutions that are there to protect, if the government wants to see this issue tackled, then they have to put up resources. They have to invest in organisations that are doing this work. I've never been one for, taking government funding, but if there are institutions out there, organisations that are working on a grassroots level to highlight this issue, to protect youngsters and to capture the people who are involved in these criminal activities, then the government should do that. And I think that this is part of the problem. It's not just a problem under the current coalition government. It's something which we inherited from the Labour government as well, which is a lack of resources. So if you want action from the Pakistani community, you've got to invest resources.
Right, so that's Mohammed Shafiq. He's Chief Executive of Ramadan Foundation. We also have on this show Mubin Hussain. He's founder of British Muslim Youth. Zuleika Ahmed is founder of APNAHAG, and Alias Kamani is director of Street UK. They are great guests. We're not done with them yet. We're taking them to the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. One last thought though for the main show on this story. Let me show you on my laptop. This is from the Telegraph. This is today, and this is a headline that makes this conversation worthwhile. Rotherham abuse, 25 more victims come forward. The more the conversation happens, the more perhaps justice will be done for youngsters, young girls, young boys who were abused. To be continued, stream.aljazeera.com. Let me just tell you about the next show before we go. Can you imagine young people running Nigeria? Would it be better or worse? We will discuss how the 30% or nothing movement is pushing for younger politicians in Nigeria. Interesting conversation for the next show. See you online. Thanks for watching. Hello again, this is the Streams Post Show. We've been discussing the sex abuse scandal in Rotherham in England. Something we didn't touch upon in the main show, but I really want to go there now, is that after this story broke, and it's been rumbling around for many, many years, and always little extra bits of the story come out, and then we've got the inquiry report come out, there's been a backlash. And I really want to hear from people in Rotherham and also other parts of the UK about what does that backlash look like, feel like, if you're in the Pakistani community. Mubin, can you share some stories with us? What's happened since then?
There's been, even as I'm on live now, I'm hearing reports that there's been backlashes within the Rotherham community. There's been incidents of racism. I myself was actually doing an interview with a presenter who actually was live when an individual drove past and called me a Muslim groomer, even though I'm there standing up and speaking against these groomers and asking for reports to go back to 1997 and every single groomer to be arrested.
That's a whole new insult that I've never heard before.
Yeah,
it's another label. It's another label to throw now at the Pakistani community.
And in the words of Sunny Hundal, whether it be ISIS, whether it be terrorism, whether it be radicalism, or even Rotherham now, or grooming, it's the same thing. It's a minority of individuals committing a crime and a label being put on the majority. And in this case, the word Muslims not even mentioned within the report. Pakistani men is mentioned. And this is what we're finding. We're finding a backlash. On the 13th, we're seeing the EDL Rotherham.
Mubin, we've still got to do something about it. This is the balance now. Of course, there's a climate. Can I just yeah. Look, we've got to realise that there is a context. The context is of the war on terror, Islamophobia. But equally, we have vulnerable young people out there we have to protect. So sometimes I think by totally focusing on the overall context, and sometimes we have to get out there and protect children.
Ilyas, the one thing I want to come out with now, if you look at Telford, you look at Rochdale, look at all the other cases, Rotherham is the first case that on the first week we had a community conference with the press there to see what the community reaction is. On the 20th, we're going to come out with a demonstration that will be a united demonstration. And live from this stream, I'm inviting both Ilyas and Mohammed Shafiq to be speakers at this united demonstration.
Happy to come.
The whole
Thank you.
coming out and speak against this kind of incidents taking part. But race and religion cannot be the case, and we cannot have race riots on our streets.
Zuleika, talking about some of that backlash, I just want to bring Zuleika in here because we have this tweet dipping into the conversation, the wider conversation that's happening online. Lucy writes, authorities' fear of being labeled racist has probably led to greater racism in Rotherham. Fear for innocent Asian men there now, and of course not just men, but also women, especially those who are visibly Muslims. Zuleika, what stories have you been hearing?
Over the last 3 weeks, we've had increased levels of harassment, verbal abuse. We've had white women, for example, who are converts, reverts, who are visibly Muslim. They've been sworn at, they've had their clothes pulled, and the white racists have been angry that these white women are choosing to join a religion that they choose to see as part of the groomers. For me, there's a bigger issue in terms of, I must have done about 20 interviews in the last 2 weeks, and the number of journalists, for example, that have used sexual grooming and Pakistani communities or Pakistani men and Islam as well in the same sentence is appalling. So, and the number of professionals that I've spoken to as well, in terms of the different radio broadcasts. And again,
so Zuleika, when that happens, what do you do when people frame the conversation? Hold tight for just a moment. When people frame the conversation that way, do you just sit there and let them say that, or what is your response, your retort?
No, in terms of my line of work, which is 20 years of work around domestic violence, and we know that, for example, that domestic violence crosses all races, cultures, and we know that in terms of sexual grooming, it's exactly the same. We also know, for example, the cases that have been mentioned before in terms of Jimmy Savile or the children's homes. The UK over the last 10 years has seen a lot of abuse that's been uncovered, and nowhere have the communities been victimised the way that they have in this instance. So in terms of the work that we do,
so you say that to the reporters because this is an education process. The fact that people are abusing you in the street, calling you a Muslim groomer, this is just ignorant, okay? So there's an education process that has to happen. You do that?
Yes. Right. I have to because I'm visibly Muslim.
Yes. Okay.
So and what the reporters often will do, will put in a sneaky question and and say, what does Islam say about this issue?
Ooh,
Can I just come in for 30 seconds? Just 30
yes,
seconds
you may. I didn't mean to shush you. Go ahead.
The point I want to make is I completely agree with Mohammed on certain points, that there is debates to be had. There is a problem also within this criminal mindset of individuals that so happen to be Pakistani. I agree with that, and I agree there is debates to be had. But the reason why we can't move on these debates before justice is being served, before these prosecutions are being made, is because these victims aren't being thought about. I think there are many debates to be had. One of the debates is what was mentioned by Sue Belowich, the Deputy Children's Commissioner. She was talking about on a field visit to a police station. She looked on the internal computers, and on these types of crimes, Asian males were being searched, and she asked, what if these individuals weren't Asian males and these were perpetrators? And the police officer in charge replied, we aren't looking for these types of individuals. There are many debates to be had on child exploitation and grooming.
And if I can come
specific to Rotherham. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Can I come in, Femi? This is the danger of racializing crime. Now, my primary objective is to protect children from sexual abuse. When you racialize crime, what you do is you fixate on one model, and that is that. And the street grooming is one model amongst many models, and you fixate on one target group, i.e., Pakistani men and white girls. As Zuleika has rightly mentioned, the victims come from all backgrounds, but unfortunately, black girls and Asian girls are invisible, as if they're not a victim. The only reason they're invisible is because of codes of honor, they can't come forward, or because of gang-related intimidation issues, they can't come forward.
All right.
It's not that they're invisible. So there's a fixation on particular models. And let me tell you how bad it gets. I was training some social workers who said, we don't have a problem around grooming here. I said, why? He says, because we've got no Pakistanis here. Now that is exactly. I was shocked when I heard that. I was absolutely shocked when I heard that, because it shows there's a fixation on a particular model, and that you're not going to protect children.
All right, okay, hold tight, everybody, apart from Mohammed. Mohammed, what did you want to add?
I just want to say, really, as I've said on the live program, we've got to attack this phenomenon. We cannot find excuses, and we can't get into this business of comparing. And what really worries me at times is when people say, oh, well, white people are doing it, or this is happening, that. We cannot become defensive. We've got to confront this issue head on, and it's a child protection issue. And the other thing I think is very, very important is we've seen today 13 men in North Yorkshire who've been convicted and put away for 34 years on the street on the same crime, on-street gang grooming. They all are white. And we didn't see the same headlines in the newspapers. So I think there is an element of Islamophobia, there's an element of anti-Muslim hatred amongst some of the tabloid newspapers. But I've been very clear from day one up until today that we've got to confront this issue, that there is a mindset amongst these criminals who think that white girls are worthless. So when they think that they can use and abuse white girls, then it does become a race issue. It's got nothing to do with religion, but it has got something to do with race. And I think the idea that we try to take away the issue. Let me just we're all frontliners.
All right, everybody, let Mohammed finish his sentence. Hold tight. You just threw the equivalent, the verbal equivalent of a grenade into the room, Mohammed, and then ran out.
No.
All right, just let Mohammed finish, because we are coming to the end of this show. So just let him finish the thought. Go ahead, Mohammed.
I think we're all frontliners, and we're all engaged in this debate and campaign. I'm saying that when these men have this mindset and they think that white girls are worthless, then it does become a race issue. Race is a contributing factor, not the only reason, but it's got nothing whatsoever to do with religion.
Mohammed, you were supposed to be the final voice. You were supposed to wrap it all up for me, and now everybody's all agitated. We are taking this online.
I love Ilyas, and I love Mobeen, and I love the sister as well. I pay tribute for all the work that they do. Well, we can't always agree on anything, but race is an important
The point I'm making, Mobeen, Mohammed, is this. All sexual abusers dehumanize the victim. So it is a profoundly obnoxious hate crime. It's misogyny first and foremost. You see, Jimmy Savile thought his victims were worthless.
Why are we talking about Jimmy Savile so much? I really don't want him to be in this show anymore. Okay. Everybody, I hear all your points. You made them beautifully for the whole conversation. I want to thank you for your time that you gave to us on this show. So Mohammed Shafiq, Alias Kamani, Zuleika Ahmed, and Mobeen Hussain, they are not done yet, but I know that conversation is a very rich one, and it will go online at #AJStream. Meanwhile, moving on to our next show. What if the youth ruled Nigeria? Oh yes, we discuss how the 30% or nothing movement could shake up the country's leadership. We will have that conversation on the next AJ Stream. See you there.